Rinpoche Nado Dele. Good morning, Katrina, and a very warm welcome to all our friends online. If you'd like to make a donation for these wonderful series of teachings, please have a look in the chat box for some information about how you can do that. And there you'll also find a link to all the prayers that we regularly do. So we'll begin with those.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, oneness gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor of the world, supreme God of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, day of the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When I was supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom, too well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash, a lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit, ascension beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults. And be delivered from the ocean of psychic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn, Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy. from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love. Let fall a rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Oya Loseling.
Oh, can't get tension, but you got one member, two member, one member, two member, one member, two member, Tade to me, Drepung, you shishi them. So we're saying, Manam Jet, but the la chasa. Oh, yeah. Oh, Dakasuda. Simje Tamjagaton, Simje Tamjagaton, troop to Gaggy. You could say you and they could there. Landur, you near Tamje. Chitawa Shindu Shinking, Saji, Kovan, Chineja, Tobar Shas. Oh, teach it on it. Shinyangi in some Kuno. Lepor sent of December shoes.
So here, beginning with the praise to the Buddha that was given by Nagarjuna, wherein he says that to he who teaches dependent origination, that is free from cessation or origination, free from annihilation or permanence, free from coming and going, free from one and many, to him I bow down. And so here, with that kind of recognition that we are listening to these teachings for the sake of being able to attain the state of Buddhahood, that state in which we are able to benefit all sentient beings, we should set a good motivation for listening to the teachings.
Oh, yeah. Danga some today in Ba. Dala Saya come down. Ginyam do Tage. Sabu Tembe Chawa Chawanya do Messim Sostirwa. Oh, yeah. Danga Tanda. Dala Saya come down. Saya Jungatic Siwara. Chilo Gitsishin Naxella Soba. Salin Jangbala Soba Cheshik Saya come to Sogasiwara. Take it Kenshin any day. Salin Jangbala Soba Tishin Naxella Soba Sama Chigiwara. Oh, take a Chigiwara day. Tina day. Tage any take our soda. Saya come down Dinyam do Tage, Sabu Tempe Chawa Chawanyam do Messias. Sabu te tensa que Shichi Korba, Saddle Tene. Then such men and I'm going to Tonga Shashani Kigmarwa. So Sadik Koshi, the Tenki Chawa Chigara. So Sabu Tempe Chawa Chigret, Sabu Tempe Chawa Chawanyam do. Some look Kugmares, Kulungi Yoyoma. The Digitol Karishagurasana. Won't you la soba Chebabon to get us okay? Sishin Natella Soba Tezo, some Koran do step bado. Lega Chechunga de Kulun de Titi Kiko. Kulungu Samlish Tanga, any kigri, Timado Koran Rankichawachi, maybe 200 Yungara. Oh, Timel Soyatodara. Ti kulung pocho de kulung yo ma yo samlo ma res. Koran tengin juda nyelen da lenche chigen tsama sang wang ki res. Salun jangba la sikde se sanje ge che son de ya. Shinge tajil pe salun jangba la de be shinge ngobo jangba be ngo se ke de chi ora. O de la sine song do wa. Ke de ngobo koran ge ne chu gu ta ne. Ze gu res cheba bo shanda ji ge samlo ta ne. Ti wang ge ti du yong ge yo ma res ti ha ko ya tan da ya. Shinga ni salun jangba la sikne se. Nezu kanga de ngara zungu korang tone se gura. Kudan kele tene kia de neba kanga korang liore stita gura. Kele tene ni meta ba tungya wa tamela so wa teso. Ne semje de bache ina kongara to taya de semje le ba ta gura. Semje le pemba truwe ta chamba da tsewa da tiwange sosu tabgi cha sangbo dia pewa che gure se. O de tab de shirab tingi de ngobu korang ta gura mache. Kobe tso de ha ko gura nga Kobe tso de karesana, chidang ko wanju la soba tezu cheba rese, sangma de kunlung samlutani yungu rese sambayina, ko kisen chide yuarwa koran pengirwa. Kyaga tozu sigira, ke meshinge tozu ke dogu chuna, malik sigira konze, takpo desera. Malik marchi re sigira, ko so tabgirwa. Punja koran tinde sobere, digre serese. Malik marchi hasi. So to go she does a copendo de yora. Shandazil palo, Keshan, Kangati Chigris and the Soso, Kangeri Juna, Yagare Juna, so at Upsada, Chipige, Kangese Sagatirachi, Rocha Sarachiora. This samled on the Pengiora Chochilia. Te Yabure, Ina, Kansa Chochilia. This assembly of Babu Yomare. Caris so in the Vichi Okora. So get up the Shira Karina Yaga the Karina, Rala Nebashi Okres. Mobile pa tada de madire, cancel pa simple tada de madire. Tilo soju tango de tinde ranzo rese. Shendaji chingechi yo mare ti yo na ani degree de. Yo mare soso re soso kale jau se rang che samlu de shuk chembule betodala. Cheba boge ti samju de ba shane soso che ta. Wo venezi so che ne samye ti samlu tangiora. O ti sona.
So here, where we have left off in this sutra, in the book, it is on page 4, beginning with regarding that, it does not occur to the earth element. I perform the function of supporting the seed. So here, when we are talking about the kind of causality, causes and conditions that lead to something like a rice sprout, the earth element acts as a support for like a field, for a support for a sprout. But it's not as though we couldn't grow a sprout from a seed in just air, like just in space, but rather it needs something that acts as a support, that has that capacity. However, there isn't some sort of like a will or an intention behind that, some kind of a creator that acts as the impetus for this to happen. So it's not, as it says here, it doesn't occur to the earth element. I act as a support for the seed, but rather this is the nature of things, the way that they are, such that when the causes and conditions are assembled, are complete, then it will lead to a result. It's not as though there needs to be the presence of some kind of will of a creator or an intention of a creator in order for the earth to function as a support or the seed to give rise to a sprout. And so the Buddha taught this Dharma on the basis of like walking by a field of green rice sprouts coming up. And he is teaching on the basis of the actuality, the reality of things. We need to then base our kind of actions on that search for reality, the way that things actually exist. And in dependence upon seeing them as dependently originated, we can then come to understand the nature of their being suffering and being impermanent and suffering, empty and selfless, and so forth. So when it comes to then us as practitioners to recognize things as dependently originated means that we take sort of responsibility. Like if we want to train our own mind, we need to develop love and compassion. We need to develop the sort of method side and the wisdom side in order to become a Buddha. It isn't as though this is dependent upon the will of a creator or something like that. Now, when we look at there can be a benefit to having this sort of acceptance of some kind of creator, higher power. We can see how it is of comfort to people to be able to, say, bear with difficulty, whether it is good or bad that occurs. If you think, oh, this is the will of this creator, it can act as a kind of way to handle what comes your way. There's a place that you can sort of put your hope or put your faith in. However, when it comes to Buddhist practitioners, we need to base our understanding on the way that things actually exist. And this means recognizing dependent origination. It means that in order for us to improve or develop certain qualities, we need to take responsibility for ourselves. Developing the mind, improving the mind, working with that is not something that comes from a creator, but rather through the causes and conditions that we ourselves create.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the Chitan, Shikabata, Tazunala, Songudwa. Chedelia, Chitan, Titu Kagalia, River, so Sumio, Resera. A Kasha de Chi, Lugi Kunju, so Rabche, Tito, Shukabura, Tia Puchona, a Kasha Mara Kunjol, so at Taviata, and a cheap and then Shovala Sawa, and the Sunday that to the Kodakora. Tito Chene. Kangapa location party shabati. So church content the Bantamata Sundipta in this year the so church. Now but the assembly are Juatan so some Lutantan like Juatan so. This on the number Sanjay Sun at the church to Tower days. One will not to so toast it. This on the so the social assembly Juatan, the some Lutantan Juatan, Ilunga Kunjuli Juatan, the less on essay, assembly Juatan. Yewangi Samlutanda Wang Lungal Yuachi. In that George, so that was Kalakao, social Samlutan, social Samluyaketan Guada. Oh, this is son, huh?
So generally, as we see in, for example, Aryadeva's 400 verses and elsewhere, there are sort of different types of people. Like, for example, in India, different ways of having faith. There are those that think that by modifying their behavior, engaging in austerities, there will be some sort of change. So they focus primarily on those kinds of external activities. Then there are those who really place their hope, their trust in some kind of creator. They make requests, they make prayers, and in turn hope to gain some kind of transformation through those requests and prayers. And then there are Buddhists who look at the mind as being primary, and they say that this is what we need to work on. We need to work with our own mind. Us as individuals need to recognize the kind of thoughts that we have and try to improve them, try to develop a good and bad being based on the mind. So in ways, this is a more subtle kind of understanding that our actions are determined to be good or bad based upon the motivation. And so we ourselves have to take responsibility for working with the mind.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Not tell us I come down the Yamdos. Say come to the sub, you could see now tell us over call. I give a tenchi grace or a shiro chigores. In a shichigi yambe, some loyo comares. You get the chance on a yelling that lenji the chance on a coke with the mother. Some low. Kunu yo my tugmare set on Darwa. The Saya Campiandinium do Target Sabe, Tembe Chawa Chawanium do Messim Sauce. Tation do Chu Campiandinium dos. Target Sabe Lemberchaw, Chu Cam de Sabe, Tambu trouble with the two Lembers, Bebos, and Tena and you get you order. Or teach you order Chawa de Chu order, Inati, Chawa de Chego, Samsang, Kulung Yoa, Shandada. Korangune ke koma rese tandaro. Lembar chao nyamdo mesim sosa. Tene me kambian de nyamdo tage sabe yonso. Tor cho trede korwa nima pokro. Trede korwa mataje koming ni achi ke de yungu amara tambu da te shagra. Tende chawa chi yorte tende chawa chi go samsanda chawa chishi senge tinde kulun ko ma resi atandaro. Dene taagi sabyo yoso tawara chawa nyamdo meseso. Lungi kamja denyamdo taagi sabyo yoso buwara chawa nya. Lungde kuyo ara kyuliya. Tegi sabyo de ya kye chuyo ra ya chiru chura. Lungde mena ya tong chetu yo mara. Ya chiru ra chinchi ya kyebura. Buwara chawa nyamdo meseso. Namge kamja denyamdo se. Tongsang de kuyo ra. Tongsang chi mena kyetu mara. Tongsang de namge kam puga namga se ura. Namga takba se te mara. Puga namga tongsang si ngazu u tang sada. Ba sacha tongba kam kukudo ha chuswa. Namge kam jan de nyamdo. Taage sabu mara koso. Namge kam jan de nyamdo. Taage sabu la miti be chawa nyinme. Kurang kache pel na pel chugyo ara. Ko chara biche tongba mena ni ko rusagi yo mara ya peya yo mara. Tripkir ba ko. Miti biche kurang kache ke na ke lomba ta chi ya ka karba ke chawa chigyo res. Ina te chego samsang kulun ko mares. Ana ko wale so miti be chawa nyado mesimso. Tiyu jan de nyamdo taage sabu kyuwara chawa nyamdo. O tiya ha kogura. Tiyu de lenyi yo ara samsang nga zu tuye. Chiruba tiyu de chiruba ke tiyu cheba bon denge chi yo ara. Gongchu cheba bo se ara, chiso cheba bo se ara. Tiyu cheba bo, tiyu takba se ara konzo. Tiyu de takba ra tiyu ye wange nima chamo kanga tiyu wange su soyong go resi go ara. Namba tiyu kele, tiyu de ngobu re, demin du chi re. Chi nga zu chawa chedang ta chi ne chu le teni tiyu paa tagi yo ma do. Tiyu kanga su soyong go ma re. Nga zu tiyu se nima sha shoke ti chi de, nga zu tiyu se ming takbo sampi. Demin du chi chi tu go ara. Go karso ra. O tiyu de ko tiyu de ge samsang liya tiyu de paa kagi re. Tiyu kaya tiyu takbo de kagi yo ara. Tiyu ki wangi chewa ma re sa te. Samsang tiyu de kuyo ara. Tiyu de sabyo re si tamna tiyu kali yuwa shing na kuyo ara. Tiyu jan de nyamdo taga sabyo kyora chawa nyamdo. Mesim so se. Waticha. Watiba do chilam na.
No. So here, as it says, it does not occur to the earth element. I perform the function of supporting the seed. I mean, in order for a seed to give rise to a sprout, it needs to have that kind of support. But it doesn't need to have the will of something like an intent of a creator or otherwise. So then it says, similarly, it does not occur to the water element. I moisten the seed. We have this kind of hard seed that needs moisture in order for that to be able to develop further. And again, it carries out that function, water does, but it does so in the absence of any kind of intention or will of a creator. And then it needs to be heated in some way, sort of developed through the fire element. So it does not occur to the fire element. I mature the seed. And so too, it does not occur to the air element. I open the seed. So again, the air or this kind of wind element is necessary in order for a seed to ripen and grow, to be able to develop. And so too, it needs to have the space element. But again, it doesn't occur to the air element. I open the seed. It does not occur to the space element. I perform the function of not obstructing the seed. So again, we have to have space in the sense of like when we breathe in and out, we need to have those empty spaces so we can take in air. And so too, when a seed is developing into a sprout and then a stalk and then leaves and so forth, it needs to have that space in order for that to occur. So it doesn't occur to these elements. It isn't as though they are motivated by some kind of a will, but rather when they are all present, this seed can develop into a sprout. And so it does not occur to the season or to time. I perform the function of transforming the seed. So here, when it comes to time, there are different sorts of understandings that we could have. There are non-Buddhists who assert time as being like a kind of creator, like Brahma or something, in that it is the permanent kind of function, a permanent thing that brings about change within impermanent phenomena. So as opposed to that, Buddhists would assert that time is a non-associated compositional factor. It is something that is merely designated. In dependence upon certain conditions, we can say, oh, this is morning, this is evening, but it isn't as though there is some thing called time that exists as a permanent that causes a kind of transformation and change. So here, when Buddhists are speaking about time, or as it's translated, season, this isn't like a permanent kind of creator or actor in the sense of the non-Buddhist conception, but rather is a non-associated compositional factor.
뭐야? 난 요거 안 되냐면도 세. 난 요거 고란 드레부 끼기 와라. 그 년년대 사변 되게 끼기 와라. 현재 제진데 사회감 주감 매감 농감 남게감 대서 끼기도 와. 주단 깨니가. 걔도 요거 고란 끼기 와르데. 나 되네 사변다. 에네 사추 매론 중알로 속에 자와대다 대체는 가께서 삼상게 꿀롱게 요하게 고 말해서 와라. 주진 고란 창선하는 데부 거래야 깨운 그러마도 띵아 깨서 삼사 삼로 따는 마도 매기바 꿀롱게 요하면은 매기와 텐데 말해서 전달와 요거야 되냐면도 다네 내가 다네 깨대다게 깨서 냠도 메심서서 요거야 나 사병게 예례전에 깨서 삼 감주부터 현재 지진전에 내가 자와대다 대전에 깨서 삼서 삼고 말해서 오라 요구야 안 되냐도 다 깨대다게 주부냐도 몇세 몇개서 왜냐하세 그런 요하면은 그런 교단 깨도 선선하니 깨운 거래 교단 깨 맞잖아 삼로 가르다나 거기에 그거 말아 그런 삼다 깨대다게 하세 사번 어디를 가서 거기서 대다게 계속냠도 몇세 몇개에서 원장 깨대다 여봐 깨대다 여라 사병 가봐나 교단 깨대도 상마차 봐 되긴 좋아서 어디 되네 사병데 망가도데 니 요구데 년년데 야게 온 그래서라 사병 가봐나 니 요구야 깨온 그래서 사병 가봐나 요구 엄바도 봐 주로세 대신도 다 계속 가가지고 봐라 내려오다 다 대신도 매도 요나 드비 바르도야 엄바 두고 대신도 컴퓨터지 신도 라 kushunda tende na ko tongbo chenpo cha ni meto cha ni tele tene tu se chungombo ro chunju cha ni shingdo ya cha gu ra te shindo meto yo na debi pato ya ngomba tubar jude se nyogu de ya ta ge ma che o tiba de chi lam na
No. So here in this case again, it does not occur to the seed, I produce the sprout. The seed acts as the substantial cause of giving rise to a sprout, but there is no kind of will or intention, a thought there. And it doesn't occur to the sprout, I was produced by these conditions. Again, we have the substantial cause, the seed, and the coordinating conditions of earth and water and fire and so forth. But it doesn't necessitate there being some kind of will or intention. However, when these conditions exist and the seed ceases, a sprout will be produced. So this follows all the way up to, similarly, up to when the flower exists, a fruit will also be produced. So even in the absence of such a will or a thought and intention, when the causes and conditions are complete, when you have the substantial cause of the seed and all of the coordinating conditions, that will lead to a sprout. When the seed ceases, that will create a sprout. And in turn, this goes all the way up to when there is a flower. And then from that flower, you have the production of a fruit, whether it's an apple or a peach or whatever. This is the way in which causality functions in the absence of there being some kind of intention or will.
뭐야 누구때야 다게 맞췄어 다 누구때 간데스 끼고 그래서 다도 담마데 얘네들 현지 신의 제발을 때는 끼고 와라 대선자 그 매바 제제고 그 매발을 때는 고나야 깨셔 용거 말해서 다게 맞췄어 그라 누구 고나랑 그 깨고 막 규밀에 깨왔어 그라 규모가 코란 저 게임 그래서 랑신 나도 갑대 치료하고 좀더 산다는데 대숙 첨부 와라 어때서 나시 말에서 산제 송에 팀무 많이 받이 야 송에 된다 송게 와라 베나데 다게 맞아서 규매밖에 와라 소바테스 마트스 와라 샹게 맞아서 지소라 소바 지소서 약하셔 가서 담보 규치어를 지소서 텔레 교요 말에 대달에 규치는 코 탐매바샤나 뜻샤토고 말아 탐매바 텔레 규치는 지금도서 지소를 교요 말에 코 딱바래 란조리 되게 당어부 대딱바래 되게 간거 채용 거래서 시거라 나 샹게 지소라 소바 딱바 로 코라 규진 그 마찬게 딱바 진짜샤 되게 제가 말해서 거라 샹게 마제스 이거요 이게 맞아. 다시니가 투초네 제가 근데 말. 그래. 이게 맞아. 원주게 맞아서 다 원주라 소바테 저게 삼르탄이 서샤바. 로요아 잠비샤바 말레. 뒤지 마주르세. 뒤네 딱발라 소바테 저거 교려 말레. 단다다데 뒤 고고도 뒤기 마주르세. 뒤 딱배 왕게고. 근데 강강고 강게 끼고 있어야 되라. 요즘 마주르세. 되니까 랑신래 마중서. 대코라 랑신기 저 텐데 투바 때금이데 치바르도 마중서. 규매벨라 마제데세. 규매네게 요 말을 언장 사다 주다 매다 롱다 남게 감다 뒤지 감난 뒤네 사베 계속 장마 초네 뒤네 사변 각바나 뉴공거 바두반 유대에서 예래된 각바다 아니 대부도 껴 뒤냠을 다던다 대다 치료지 땡지 대바 중에 깨단도 왔다고 치료지 땡지 대바 중에 깨단도 왔디 어디래 사주 밀롱군 중앙에서 달리는 껴 어디 봐도 야
So then it continues by saying, and the sprout is not made by itself. So here again, where we have asserted that Buddhists have asserted that the sprout arises due to a substantial cause combined with the coordinating conditions. Here, this is primarily refuting those ideas of non-Buddhists. Here, like by saying it is not made by itself. So the assertion that is unique to Buddhists is that this is a dependent origination in the sense that it is not arisen from no causes whatsoever. In that something that arises from itself is not dependent upon any kind of external causes or conditions, but is self-arisen. So this refutes the idea that it could be somehow without any kind of cause, as in it's made just by itself. And it is not made by another. So there are those that assert that some sort of like primal principle, some sort of general principle that leads to the production of all phenomena within the world. This really is something that is seen as being uncaused. It is something that is self-arisen, a kind of permanent generality that gives rise to all of these various particulars. This is also not possible. And so where it says, it is not made by another, that is refuting the idea that it could come from something like the Samkhya's idea of this sort of general principle, and not made by both. It can't be both arisen from itself as well as another. Both of those have been refuted. It is not made by Ishvara in the sense of refuting there being some kind of will or thought that is the cause for a sprout arising. It is not transformed by time. And here again, this is the time in the sense of some kind of permanent principle of time that is unchanging and constant. But yet somehow gives rise to various impermanent phenomena. So it is also not arisen from an essential nature. This is similar to what was above in the sense that it isn't as though phenomena arise from their own natures without any other causes or conditions. So refuting there being some sort of causeless origination. This is also refuted here. And then, or born, nor born without a cause. So, however, the elements of earth, water, fire, air, space, and season having assembled, when the seed ceases, the sprout will be produced. Like that, dependence on conditions of external dependent arising is to be seen. So here, with the assembling of the substantial cause and the coordinating conditions, when that substantial cause of the seed ceases, simultaneous with that, there is the arising of the sprout. So this is the way that one should understand the kind of dependence on conditions of external dependent arising.
뭐야? 그때라 치료지 된진 대버는 좀 남방 알다です. 다 치료지 로 지신나 제라 소바 설lun장 발로 소바트도 계단 길로 깨외 수들라 안다 시기도 계단 깨외 수들라 안다 시기도 치료지 때지 대버 좀 남방 알다데서도 갈까레스는 나 강신나스 딱bar 마인 바다스 딱배 수지 지금 말해서 지그래도 니 체발 마인 바다스 야 donda nyelende manjure che nyende de ngo yang ro sha ba do tin re yo ma ta wo ne ma de yo ngo ro de sha ta bar ma yin ba ta sik she che be su ji ki ma re ti chi sha wa ho ye su ji ki ma re sha ne gyu chung len de bu chen bo ngo ba do gu de sha de dan dra we gyu do se gyu dan dra we de bu ki re sha o tin de nga do wa ya nga ti che ta nga de na tang bu de she yo da 딱bar 마인 배추지 컨데스 지거레스나 강게 실 요구야 신라스 사변야 신데스 데르비치니 마 사변 답에 듣고 신다지르바 리리라 지 타부르 지지라 제마 요구야 제데 요구디 양원부르비세 세부르 지 청주지야 게 용교하라 메카가레 송아스교하라 디 돈다 가르스 거레스 사베데 마조리 체니고 ngoke 도요 마레세 에톤다데 담마쇼나 아디 가르스도스나 지들 딱바 마이 베츠지 컨데 지그레스나 가게 치 녀고 양시알라 사베 양시데세 녀고 가인 바드니 사베 마이세 제마 녀고 제요데 사베 레데요 마르바 인주 사베 긴젤리 chen 제요라 녀고 가인 바드니 사베 마레세 dani yugo kayen ba tenye sabe mayela sabe gabale sabe magabale injeta sabe
거꾸로는 중화 많이
gabale yugo joa mai ore magabale je chom ore sabe gabale sidere sabe ngelen ga charche pe mebre charche tene nyugo che yo marwa saben ga ne tin del ne ne saben ga ba da tyam do nyugo che ko ya da o te se ya da nyugo ya shen la saben ya shen de nyugo ka yin ba tin saben mai saben ga ba le ja juwa mai se o te da le saben ga cha ne ti che le tong ba sha de ya ko che ma che che wa ma ra manga bele jamainde sabe manga bache nge mana shite ene nyu ke yo mara manga bele jamainde sabe gagba tini je che nyu gu june sabe gagba da tu nyam do ene nyu gu jung gu de se ora te shere takbar mai no sa o tak be su ji ke mare se res jonda sabe te yurne nyu ke ora
So regarding that, external dependent arising is to be seen as fivefold. What five? Not eternalism, not annihilation, not transmigration. A great result arises from a small cause and the continuity of what is similar to that. So here, the description of these will come below in the commentary. So beginning then with how is external dependent arising not eternalism, not some sort of permanence? Well, because the sprout is one thing and the seed is another, precisely that which is the sprout is not the seed. So here, there isn't some sort of eternalism or permanence in the sense that a sprout and a seed are different things. Like a rice seed or some kind of seed is like hard and round and so forth, and the sprout is something that is like soft and green. The nature of the seed doesn't continue into the sprout. The seed acts as a substantial cause for the sprout, but the sprout is one thing and the seed is another. Precisely that which is the sprout is not the seed. So after the seed has ceased, the sprout does not arise. Now here, this is talking about there being some sort of period of time wherein this seed has ceased, and then there's like an empty space or some sort of time, and then the sprout arises. Rather, the seed acts as the substantial cause, and there has to be a kind of connection between the ceasing of the the seed and the arising of the sprout. So it's not as though the seed completely stops, there's some sort of period, and then the sprout arises. And so too, it's not the case that after when the seed has not ceased, the sprout does not arise. One doesn't have a sprout produced until there is the cessation of the seed. So only at the moment the seed ceases does the sprout arise. Thus, external dependent arising is not eternalism. There isn't some kind of seed that is continuing on. It acts as a substantial cause, but it can't be that the seed has completely ceased and then there's some sort of period of time, nor can the seed remain. So it is not eternalism.
Oh yeah. That takbar mai said in this one. Sabe de bo manjurche. Ene yugo la pondra. De tapachene mares. That chidar chebar mai betsuji. Tikares sabe de che tar. Ichele ani kokye de mares. Sabe que cheba da tunyam do kewo. Chidar cheba mai shena. Gagbe on de doa, doa. Tambu sabe de ga sarshe. Tongbarisha, Yuchero, Tasabe. Teniko Yende Yugudiki at the Marisora. When Gagbe Sabe, then Yugukiwa Mai. The Sabe de Magabache Yugukiwa Marisora. The Karas Sabe and Gala Tinigese. We are Tunyam to Kigresora. Sabe Gala Tinigese. Yuchigres, Sunday to me, sunset, Dubai Yora, Chida Casa Yadus Cagra, Cadenitus, Dressora Sara. Sunday night, Chujo de Yachi, Lucinama, Jugajani Chidi, Kibajo de Akando, Tunyamra, Mado Chidi, Rinpoche on Botinashi. Sabian Gava, Tunyam do you with the Kigre Sigara. Or this on the Sabian de Kun de Chen at Tombasha and Chimaya Kokia in the Maresora. Sunday Tombation to give it easier. Cheba my nose.
So, external dependent arising is not eternalism in the sense of the seed ceasing and there being some sort of empty space between the arising of the sprout, nor is it the case that the seed somehow remains and like transfers or is the sprout. But rather there needs to be a simultaneity between the ceasing of the seed and the arising of the sprout. And so then we turn to, how is it not annihilation? Well, the sprout is not born from a seed that has already ceased, like as in the seed ceases, the continuum of that is cut, there's some sort of like empty space or time, and then there's the arising of the sprout. So it can't be that a sprout arises from a seed that has already ceased, nor is it born from a seed that has not ceased. If the seed has not yet ceased, we can't have the arising of a sprout. But however, at the moment the seed ceases, the sprout arises in the same manner as the high and low ends of a balance beam, or like a scale. When you hold up a scale and you put something on one side, the other side of it will arise simultaneously with that other side going down. And so here it can't be that the continuum of that seed is cut, as in it ceases completely, and then there is the arising of the sprout. And nor is it that the seed remains at the time of the sprout, but rather it is like this, in the same manner as the high and low ends of a balance beam. So therefore, external dependent origination arising is not annihilation.
Yeah. 다 제대로 포함만 신나서라. 사베드 누구고 만주르체 포니 끼그르 베스는 어디 말해서라. 포하서라. 뒤고 봐퍼라. 제대로 포함만 신나. 관계셔 누구랴 신나스. 누구데 사베나시 요 말과 가도도 입다 강가가가 요라. 사베야 신데서 사베데 누구야 누구데 사베나시 요 말 가도도 입다 강계차네 로가 요라. 사베야 신라 사베데 누구나시 요 말 가도도 입로 소바베 신로와 가가 요라 아시고라. 대선자 코엔 주니야 기거라 마도코 사베나시 누기고 말 누구나시 만주르시 기고 말아. 텐데 가서 제대로 포함만 배치기 끼와 간드레스나 관계셔 누구야 가도다 입다 소다다 로다 니발서 강가 가가지 와라. 사변야 신라 누구나시 요 말 배가가지 와라. 누구 가인 바더니 사변 마이세 누구 가인 바데 사변 레데요 말아. 사변이 내가도 가도도 입을 빼줘서라. 김티셔 포함만 넣어서 전다 사변데 만주르제 코티나리아 로샤나니 빠져 누구데 타고지 사변나 시여고라. 어쩐데 요 말에서라. 어찌 주나.
So then how is it not transmigration? Because the sprout is one thing and the seed is another, precisely that which is the sprout is not the seed. So here it's not as though the kind of essence, the nature of the seed becomes the sprout, transfers into the sprout. We look at a seed and a sprout and their color, their shape are totally different. By all ways that we can sort of measure or evaluate them, they're different, they're distinct. And so it's not as though the thing that is the seed somehow it becomes or transfers to the sprout. Without kind of changing. Again, we can identify that a seed is like this hard round thing, and a sprout has a color, a form, a shape, all the things that are different from that. So therefore, we can say that external dependent arising is not transmigration in the sense that the essence of the seed is not sort of carried into the sprout.
야. 제대로 교총을 내부 첨부 뭐 도구래서라 교총조절 때는 내부 첨부 도구래서 했던다래. 어디 가서 사변 총을 따발래 내부 첨부 뭐 도발 줄대. 계시를 교총을 내부 첨부 뭐 도보세. 신드버지나 신나주다세 쇼라 다 더 그런 미시 신나주다세 자갈이니 와라. 산제 그 구수대 파수다 야마른 동치바 유체를 산제 구수 세대 군에 나주다의 추신급세 줘라. 산제 구대 신 나주다 나신 야마가 세대다 파수 세대 찍어요. 차도스 파장에 세대다 야마 른도디 찍어요. 신 나주다의 진짜 연구도 파수 자가제 신나티나신 야마 톨로데 찍어요 거라. 야마 톨로데다 파수 어때나신 신나주다 세대 사변데 춘주지마도 메도 메레 네 대답수나 빼 첨부기도 아세라 치용어 보도서 치용어 볼라 레부 춘주지 담나 첨부기기 와레스 난경어 보 텔레장 펠셔와 이제라 콘도라부 슈 트라부지 세네 식춘주지 라위나야 깨지지마도 메나 냐와 예다 냐와 찬냐로서 빼 레부 섭첨부 셔버던데 깨요 제라 야 잠바다 자와라 소바텐데 베슈 첨부치게 팬더르 춘주지 팬베섬리 춘주지 땅이나야 pen Drepung dolada mekumba taba tamjeche belso Drepu chenpu tuwe yu chera. Chesa tonda ko tikpa chungchungchi na samgyo wamare kichi chigli chebe tikwe jan pe Drepu nami tsap chenpu pe kyun rinpu nyongwa yongwa ra. Kewa chungchungchi le tongchungchi ya wamare sera. Tende ko nangi Drepu le kewa da tikwa kan Drepu chi chungwa kan Drepu pelchewa de chi ngobu pewa le kya chewa yinsi. Desido kewa chungchung re sam pechigi wamare tongchungchi ya mare. Tikpa chungchung re sam nangme chi ya wamare setunda. Ya tichigi.
So then it says, how does a great result arise from a small cause? So from planting a small seed, a large fruit tree or a large fruit arises. So here from a small cause, like a seed, we can see that there's a large result that can occur. For example, I think it's called the Nirgroda tree that has branches that kind of go down as well as go up. The Buddha taught that this, for example, has a very small seed, but yet has the ability, that small seed, to give rise to this kind of large tree, this tree that has these branches that go down and go up as well. And so when it comes to external phenomena, we can observe that a small cause can give rise to a large result. And when it comes to internal causality, this is even more so the case. So we can think, for example, just like some small moment, some small little bit of word that causes us to get angry can have the result of, say, being born in the hell realms, being born as a hungry ghost. So when we look at our mind and the kind of causes and conditions that occur within our mind, a small cause, something like anger, can lead to a really great suffering kind of result. And so too, when it comes to those positive things, by developing love and compassion within our mind, it can lead to a great result. We can take rebirth as a human or a god. We could attain liberation or become a Buddha. So here, when we recognize that small causes give rise to larger results, and particularly with regard to our mind, this is especially the case, then we shouldn't disregard non-virtues, thinking like, oh, that's just something that is small. We shouldn't not think about it or not pay attention, because we can recognize that even a small non-virtue can lead to a great suffering result. So we shouldn't sort of not pay attention to or disregard those negativities, thinking, oh, they're just small. Or on the other hand, those positive actions as well.
Oya, ta tamadira. Sabin chitar taba te tabin Drepu. Ngombar tuba te chir te dan Drepu. Sabin kande chitabi inarwa. Drega sabin tamna dreg jigra. Ene kushun taba tende sabin tamna kushu jigra. Kare ina shingdo medra kare sabin tamna te dan drave. Ti kyun chima ki kushu tan shingdo kambu laso medra jigra mato. Kushu sabin tamne kambu che te de che yomara. Chezan ko sabin kare taba ina te dan drave kyun chima ki Drepu jigra mato. Sabin shendaji tam Drepu de shendaji yon tende yomara esera. Te dan drave kyu tu jigra esera. Chitar sabin taba te tabin Drepu. Ngomba tuba te che te dan drave kyu tu te. Te dana chiru jitenji drava cho nambangar ta osta nambangar ta sora. Oya tiba ta chiru.
So then finally, and here's some of this is in brackets, that how is external dependent arising the continuity of what is similar to that? Well, since the planted seed produces a similar fruit, there is a continuity, or there is continuity of what is similar to that. So, for example, when we plant a rice seed or an apple seed, it is going to lead to a fruit, a tree of a similar type. So it's not as though if we were to say plant an apple seed, we could get an apricot tree, but rather all causes are going to lead to results that are of a similar type. So in that way, external dependent arising is to be seen as fivefold.
Oya. Ta teshindo nangi tenjen Drepa jongaya. Ene nyi jichiri jo deese. Ni Ganshina, Kudan Dren Yongure, Kendan Dren Yongure, Esetira. Dig Nang Tension River Juan to Mitawa to make a litany to the Shegdua. Mitawa to make a litany. Talk about Chikwi Kuchik and Debuke, your Maristis or Yora. Midagwa Shetia could Kumambu Kutan came Mambu saw the Ake for the matter. Gay your Marise, Tandara. Jason do Nugget Tension River Juan, number Niji Shinju, the Ni Ganshina. Kudan Dren Kekure, Yelingi Kudan Dren Kekure, Legislative Kudan Dren Kekure, Esigora. O tela nage tenje debra jwa kudan dewa kanshena do kande mare be kenje tande nibe kyan la tande chwa de shek do nage tenje do da kande mare be kenje wanga niban duji de yore niba yore tikiwe niban duji le somba nam shelia pa cha she yore tele tikiwe niba tumu mai be niba yebe kyu tele tande debu de kiwe ma do Chu takba chik da chini kaya nipa mega chi debu kanga chi chinde yo mara se tandara. Tini kande marik be kenjin duji nam she chawa ne kiwe kenji ta tome marik be wange nipan duji sumba nam shiba me su ngaba jeji tukba tukba tumba o tinde chi kigiri tinde hala chuni. Ngama li tinde chima kigiri esi wara. Nipe kyan la tinde chunga ti shek doa. Tindi ya o Dudwa. Shave, Kubo. Marik be Shebane, Kevek, you Kashi Shawe Pardo se. Kedi Marik Bachuna, Duchinam, Number Tubashina, Teshendo, Nekare, Teshendo, Teshendo Kewa Chuane, Chondo Sena Kashibado, Number Tuba, Shina se. Teda Marik Ba Yobalan, Duchina Gomba Tuba, Juruana, Kewa Yona, Kashibado Gomba Tuba, Juro, so Tiba to Chilona. Digua. Don't be double to make a Latani Chuachi. Ya. Nagi tendes to keep you good to battle Siva, tender Yana good to battle. She tendes to good my tongue. Ya.
So then we turn to internal dependent arising. And so here, internal dependent arising is that which is connected with the continuum of a being, of a person. And so here it says, in a similar way, internal dependent arising also arises on the basis of two. What are the two? Dependence on causes and dependence on conditions. And so this asserts that the internal dependent arisings that occur within the continuum of a being are due to multiple and impermanent causes. So as opposed to those who would assert that there's a singular kind of permanent causes, here we need to have both causes in the sense of a substantial cause and the coordinating conditions in order for something to come about. And it also needs to be something that is an effective cause. So it is as follows: dependent on ignorance, conditioning factors, up to dependent on birth, aging, and death. So here it is the case that we need to have a cause that can actually bring about the particular effect. In the case of ignorance, this has the ability to create conditioning factors which lay down imprints on the consciousness and so forth. So each of the latter of the 12 links of dependent origination arise from the earlier. So it is dependent upon ignorance, we have conditioning factors, and dependent upon conditioning factors, then there will be consciousness, and dependent on consciousness will have the name and form, and dependent upon name and form, the six sense bases, and dependent upon the six sense bases, contact, and so forth, all the way up through birth and then aging and death. If ignorance did not arise, the conditioning factors will also not become manifest. In this way, up to if birth did not arise, aging and death will also not become manifest. So likewise, we have from out of ignorance existing conditioning factors will be produced, up to from birth existing aging and death will be produced. So here with this it describes the kind of multiple and impermanent causes, as well as causes that have the ability, that which is able to bring about a particular result. And so if that cause exists, the results will come about, and so forth.
Oh yeah. That tell a marik bayan dinyam do tage. Even do jile. And about trouble nyam do mesim. Kakal macha aerova. Odika sesana. Cheba mebe kele chunga de shigdwa. Yoa mebe kele. Kulunga yoa koma rese. De shigd. Cheba mebe kele chunga. Yoa mebe kele chunga. Ngale chunga shigba. Otinane. No, didn't. Marik bayan dinyam do tage. Even do chinanga trouble nyam do mesim so. Do chinam jan dinyam do. Tage marik ba. Angba marik ba trouble nyam do mesim so. Shebane. Deshindo. Dinyamdo tage kashingomba trubo nyamdo mesim sosa. Kiwa de kashingomba trubo nyamdo mesim sosa. Mesim so. Kashi dinyamdo ta nga ta de sora kashikorande kiwa de trubo nyamdo semba kulungi yo atende ko mare sora. Nyamdo mesim so. Bar trubo nyamdo mesim be pardo te. Najam marikba ebe duchi ngomba duchi. Joan Jura ne, Teshendo, ne, Kiwa Yebe Kashingamba Dubar, Jure Par and Jurde, the Dana Tension Reban Joa, Nugget Tension Reban Joa, Kudan Joa de Tires. Then they allow Yamama Chimachima Joa de Siodwa. Oh, yeah,
So regarding that, it does not occur to ignorance, I produce conditioning factors. It does not occur to the conditioning factors, we were produced by ignorance. And similarly, it does not occur to birth, I produce aging and death. And it does not occur to aging and death, we were produced by birth. So here, this is getting at the sense that internal dependent arising also does not involve causes that are the will of a creator, the kind of intention or motivation of a creator, but rather, again, when all of the causes and conditions are present, then the results will occur, even in the absence of such an intention or a will. So, however, from out of ignorance existing, conditioning factors are produced and become manifest. Similarly, up to from birth existing, aging and death are produced and become manifest. So we see that when the proper kind of causes are present, then the result will arise, even without the will of a creator. So in that way, dependence on causes of internal dependent arising is to be seen. This is out of causes and conditions, the first of those two causes.
Oh, yeah. Tatella Nugget Tension Reban Joa, Kenda Drawachi Dertashinara, Judan Drawadi Lapsara, I can't. Tell come true, Division. Nugget Tension Reban Joa, Ngarazu, me Luta Buddha, Ngarazu ya Soya Deco, the name Joa Mambul Tush to Guara. Come to Division, come to Bukanda, Division, come to Karkar Duni, Nugget Tension Rebati. Can't draw young with and did that. Satans. Sassi, the Sai come talk with Chattel Sassiguara. Yakasha Sassi, the Chilo Sati, that chip, the chip, the talk with Chachiboro. Sadly talk with her, Sassi Tabasada. Tikangal Sassigra, Sai Joansira, Sai Rigashira. Oh, the Satan. Should I say Naga choose Tala so about that is a Lamberic to the Sigra. Medans the drug Chadilsera, May Joan may come Sigra. Long dance the long day, your Utayeta, Nana Lungora, Tilisera. Namka dance the Namka de Tongsan did it. Puga Namka. Kana Utayeta and the good Tombacora, Tilisera. Number 7 and Duba less and the same Gora. 대전 레벨 때네 땡지 레벨 좋아 깬다 레벨 따오세 야 기본도 진도시나
So then, having described the kind of dependence upon causes of internal dependent arising, we then turn to conditions. So how is dependence on conditions of internal dependent arising to be seen? So from the 6 elements assembling, so in order for there to be the kind of elements that are contained within the continuum of a being, we need to have the assembly of these various elements. So from what 6 elements assembling? That is from earth. And when we talk about these kinds of elements, here it's not as though we're talking about like earth that is outside over there. I mean, it is the same thing in the sense of being that which is providing stability and kind of hardness, firmness. So those hard parts of the body are the earth element. And so too, the kind of water elements include our blood, our fluids, all of the various elements that have that kind of water part of them. And then fire is referring to the kind of heat within the body, the heat that aids in digestion and maturation and so forth. And then there is air in the sense of the kind of motility, our breathing in and out, as well as the movement of elements within the body. And then there needs to be space. That kind of empty space is a part of the conditions that allow for the body to be, and consciousness. And so that is from earth, water, fire, air, space, and consciousness elements assembling, dependence on conditions of internal dependent arising is to be seen.
뭐야 다 될라 나게 땡진 레벨 좋아 사회 감데 가르를 쓰고 그래서 강데 류지 사회 뭐뭐 두버셔봐 베네 사회가 소부 나로게 탁부 착강이 받들라 사회 감시 그래서 아니 류 두버셔봐 강에 받더네 추 감시자 류수 루루럽 쓰자 두버셔게 야 추 감 렘베 차도줄래 아니 추 감시 그래서 강 류지 서바다 칼라사야다 추동야다 와 최바다 무무제 사야랍텐데 양반남 조르지와 칼라세바도 마 조르샹게텔이야 매 감식을 해서라 저대가 조고요라 만 갈리지 우 천나도 조르체바 강해바다는 롱게 감시샤워스 우탄에 바 치다나 바 우탄체 속고도 저래 롱게 감식을 해서 갈리지 부비 여바체바 때네 네 남게 감시 류지 나로레 동바코라 우탄사 코라 콘주 롱도사 코라 파스 동바메나 콘주 대토 마르와 나제 강가 류지나 부비 여바체바 동바 부비 여바체바 때네 남게 감시 샤워스 강 동경기 최도 동마다 김세 강바스라 강바 베르네 까와라샤네 티츠베 갈라 티티 동마도 샤키네 까와 까와 sorry 된다 되네 아니 가래 조르제바 강에 받은 매 감시죠 강 우치나도 조르제바한테 롱게 감시죠 아 류 나로 부비여바 동바여바 제바한테 남부에 감 동상 그래서 시차오 강 동경기 최도서 온 동마다 동마스레 바 싱정 부치다에 저 때를 동마시거라 네 파조 찍발 땡기라 찍찍을 땡대 되시거라 동김기 최도 동마다 김기 최도 류지 명다 수게 누구 뭐바 두버 제바 남 소앙아 되바다 소보다 소지 봉보다 직접 소화단 두시단 두지단 넘버시부터 직질 땡대요라. 풍부가보대. 어디서거라 동김수도 땡게. 동경지수도 명당시 명수도 명기 풍부 시들수도 소외 풍부 두시번 넘버시부 풍부 되더라. 명기 풍부수도 넘버시부 셈파치파 주야 유는 주야 유자 디그선 명기 풍부수도 수디 두르베 소선도 수지 풍부수. 감시 자워스 동경지수도 ane leji mingda soji nyugu ngomba dhubar cheba nambar shebe tso nga dhubar tang sakba tang shebe yiji nambar shebe kanyinba tene nambar shebe kamshi chawo se kien teta mebar lu kiwar mingyur jeso tesu sama kukudwa lu ya yabuji teba lu ya 나게 사에 감 차시 대신도 추다 메다 주체 뭐야 추다 메다 롱다 남가다 넘버십에 감 남자 사월 줘라 탐제도 되바 될래 류응 봐줘봐 요로세 저 류세데 때서 사모 쳐내네 지게질 쪼쳐네 속도 어디봐도 제교나.
So then it says, regarding that, what is the earth element of internal dependent arising? Well, that which from bonding the body together, from holding the form together, produces the state of firmness is called the earth element. And that which causes the body to hold together is called the water element. So we have both the sort of fluidity and motility, but also the kind of cohesion is brought with that water element. And then that which causes what is eaten, drunk, bitten, and tasted by the body to be digested is the fire element. So that is that which sort of digests and processes our food and so forth. That which causes the inhalation and exhalation of the body is called the air element. And that which causes there to be an inner cavity of the body is the space element. So here we need the space within the body to be able to take in breath and so forth, and have movement within that. So that which produces the sprout of a name and form of the body assembles the group of five consciousness and is the contaminated mental consciousness in the manner of a reed bundle is the consciousness element. So here we have then those sorts of elements that produce the form of the body, that which is suitable as form. And then we have that which comes under the category of name. Now here it is described as in the manner of a reed bundle. The Tibetan here to me seems to read in the manner of like a house with rafters and so forth, sort of the scaffolding or the sort of rafters of a house. So there is then within name those elements of feeling, discernment, consciousness, and karmic formations. And consciousness, so that which produces the sprout of name and form of the body and assembles the group of five consciousnesses and is the contaminated mental consciousness in the manner of like a reed bundle or sort of the rafters in a house kind of holding that up is the consciousness element. So here this is given the name in the sense that it is our consciousness which distinguishes and gives names to things. And then we have the form aggregate. And those which hold that together is the consciousness element, the kind of connection between those which are physical elements and the consciousness element. So without these conditions, the body will not be born. But when the internal earth element is complete, and similarly the water, fire, air, space, and consciousness elements are complete, from all those assembling, the body will be produced. So here, in addition to the kind of substantial cause, one needs the kind of conditions that are supportive of that. And when all of those are complete, there can be the body can be produced, whereas in their absence, there's no way for this to come about.
Oh yeah. Tela tate chibari yang, tela sai kam jasdi. Yo amebe kutela yang, kutige drebu kigi warte, drebu de kigi yin samsang samlo ko mares. Drebu de kuti kigi warte nga tigi ke son samsang kuno yo ko mares tishe yora. Yo amebe kyale tani chon ya cheba mebe kyale tani chon she. Tela sai kam jasdi nyam do tage dune luji. Ngoba drobo nyam do mesimso. Chui kampian dinyam do taagi luigi, tubar chao nyam do mesimso. Me kampian dinyam do taagi lu, ene kasi lu seba dan, thongwa dan, cheba dan, nyangba nam, ro nyangba la soba, tenam juar chao nyam do mesimso. Khalan juwe de tuyog jugdwa. Lungi kampian dinyam do taagi luigi, bu china do, juar chao nyam do u tongba jugu samsa samgi wamaris. Judan kien kare ina koti, judan kien kona tsaw ni rigor mado, tida te chago samsa kunu ko maris ora. Tatunda chebabu yuwa ko maris yegura. Namge kam jandi nyam do, taagi liu jina pubiyo ba chao nyam do mesim sto. Nambar shibe kam jandi nyam do taagi mingdan sugi nyugu, ngomba drobo nyam do mesim sto. Namshi de ora. Denyamdo, Lujan Denyamdo, Tane, and then Jonga Jadagi, Yake so Nyamdo Messimsus. Unja, Kenta da Mena, Luke or Menjorosa. Tiba the Chigo, tell us, I come, or Tiba the Chigo. Yeah.
So here, this is similar to what has come above in the sense that getting at that these causes and conditions are not something that is motivated by a will or the thought of a creator God. It says, regarding that, it does not occur to the earth element. I, from bonding the body together, produce the state of firmness. So when we have that earth element, it acts in that capacity, but in the absence of having some sort of intention or will behind it. And so too, it does not occur to the water element. I give the body cohesion. It does not occur to the fire element. I digest what is eaten, drunk, bitten, and tasted by the body. It does not occur to the air element. I perform the body's inhalations and exhalations. It does not occur to the space element. I cause there to be the inner cavity of the body. It does not occur to the consciousness element. I produce the name and form of the body. It does not occur to the body. I was produced by these conditions. Nevertheless, when these conditions exist, the body will be born. So it's not as though there's some sort of factor of a will, a creator, God, having some sort of intention to bring this about, but rather when these conditions exist, the body will be born. So this is very similar to what has been stated above in terms of refuting those kinds of causes that are the will of a creator.
Oh yeah. Tatunda Kongarazu, so dade, Pumbungala tene, and ya so de yara, Pumbungala tene tapicura. Pumbungabu dene, Shibajin Judedoa. So Boletango do Sachu, Melon Jola Tango. The end of Tade. Midaba in Batanga Teha Koda. Mambocha Latene Sodedoa. Sumbuche de Ete. Sachu, Melon, Joan, Namgatonsa, Shibajal Tegodoa. Oh, Teletan and Sada Soboge. Sachu, Melon, Joan, come to Namshiki Tensigodoa. Mazushi did not Sachula Temsigodoa. Sayin Junga de Namshiki Tenship and Niva Mabshadoa. The Nichu in Junga, the Majuan, the Panja, Junta to Namshiki Tenshiba, Namshila Rowachi to Yamara, Sonexido. O de and the Nilu de Tama, Juama Bushibajala turn a legacy uda. So somebody there, the Mambocha Turch and Delne, Tegodoa, Shen Dije Tamje, Medaba. Chimoviana, Chumabuchi Tone, Yakosumbuchi de Uyara. Nagita in a Tara. 진도 건드제 탐제 메다바스 깨치 주라데 세트 teso시요라 대 아버지하고는 아주 뒤제 탐제 깨치 주도와 깨치 주다 깽이야 깨고봐 대하고도 시께서도 딱 봤던 것이 때에도 단다 고도 근데 칠로 올롱장만 매나 야부요 말에서 롱장만 거래 지제장만 거래서 깨쇼기도 대대 그 단단한 주시네 근데 삼르다나네 메다바이 메다 하고 터고도 치응어버이나다 응어버이나다 나경어이나 가가 살좀 melon 거 좋아하다 때들 때는 그 깨지 로바시고다 속고다 미나 선부체대 되더라도 소보 강가 남식이 때셔다 지게질 로바시대 그도 되는데 미다바이 바데 하고 터고야다 가서래 살륜 장발라 시그네스 송고야데 치응어부터 저 사춘 melon 거 좋아 그 전에 거들기도 쓰되 대야 깨와데 지르제바보 딱바다 밑은 배교다 딱배교다 된대요 말이스 코나 교지 교다 깨 초벌 때는 야기게 세데 미다바다 제바다 대강 같은 애 하고 돌아 치다나 그거 상무 탐제 미다바데세 깨지 인조아데세 대저 야보하고 했던달 송교와라 nenden je kapti ko jagaliati tawashenda de shuchembe samlutanda saba sene me dende yore samlu dende ta yore se tisungyo yara tichana ne de fa chane ke chembu che sungdo shen chili chana ha kondo ri doa ina ko shuchembe shebuje ngobo kanga sheba bogo samlu ji mena zan kujo kora jaya me samlu yara zan ka ge che me bashe 어떤데 말해서 뭐 코란을 내가 요래 코란 주규진 내가 요래 말아서 다르시네 소소소 뛰어래 강가 현대지 집에는 누가 맹게시다 누가 민도 소았던 말람 접대 마도 제요 말아 소소란 내가 지어래 산제 심제 탐절 산제 르기 캡그래서 그거서 연대 건데지 내가 요래서 소소 깔래 겸마겸 배서 마셔네 하요 말아 어떻게 저자 하고도 아마도 버저들의 각버체티 연대 요마르 가게 팬도 요마르 시요 마라 삼루탄단 덴데시 와레 삼루탄단 덴데시 타나 소소게 제쿠베데 로아 디두 가레네 소소 게 첨부인 바다 하고야 덴데 어디실람이야 안데
So, here, as we'll continue with this text, we have this body, and we have something that we think of as a self, but it is dependent upon many kind of causes and conditions. When you look at like being alive, this is something that is dependent upon many impermanent causes and conditions. It's sort of momentary. When we think about the conditions that lead to us being alive, we are dependent upon these elements. And actually, at the time of death, they dissolve in the sense that they lose their ability to act as a support for consciousness. And this is what constitutes dying, is that kind of a withdrawing of those elements in the sense that they're no longer able to act as a support for our consciousness. And so for our body to be alive, we depend upon many impermanent causes and conditions. And so by just observing, by looking at the world, we can see that all compounded phenomena are impermanent. And so too for the I, for the self, it is dependent upon these kinds of impermanent conditions. When we look at phenomena that are dependent arisings, whether external things or internal things, we can see that they are dependent upon their respective causes and conditions. So human beings being alive, again, is dependent upon the aggregation of many causes and conditions for that to be. It's not as though there's some sort of like permanent cause such that it would always be there. So here, in the context of this sutra, the Buddha is teaching on the basis of having seen this rice sprout and teaching that this rice sprout, the seedling, is not something that is arisen from a creator. It's not something that that has arisen from a kind of permanent cause or is self-arisen. And really, he is teaching this in the context of refuting such strong views that were held in India at the time, that all phenomena came from some sort of general principle, or it was self-arisen, or from a creator God, from the will of a God, and so forth. But rather, this all external and internal phenomena are impermanent and are subject to dependence upon their causes and conditions. It's not as though we would be able to have any kind of functioning if the things were permanent, if they were not dependent upon causes and conditions. So really, if we look at some sort of assertion of being like self-arisen or existent in and of itself, there could be no kind of efficacy. There could be no ability to change and transform. And so really, when the Buddha has taught dependent arising in this way, as well as the fact that the Buddha element pervades all sentient beings, this is really a matter of recognizing our own efficacy in terms of causes and conditions. In order to, we all have the ability, the sort of seed, to become a being who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities, but it is dependent upon us creating the proper kinds of causes and conditions. Happiness and suffering as well are dependent upon causes and conditions, and therefore we need to take the responsibility for creating those kinds of causes and conditions. And so this is something that is asserted in distinction to the kind of views that existed in India at the time.
Oh yeah. That is one, Tibadora. That tell us I come net tamai. That dinner ne so we charge Pubunga so Bambudoa. Lugi Chanese Sakam Chugam Mega Lunga Mambudoa. That is a redene tamares about to Giara. Tell us I come net tamai. Simjam mais. Kiwachine Chidulange Simjam Mare. So Mares. So said they could couldn't do your castle. Oh, so yeah, no sauce, dog ming show. Joabo my door. And then she gave her my. She said the dog ming the children and you tumble Tommy concert made to she cigarette Sarah. Don't that dog make number ring me that. She gave her my. Shibu mai, she chinechi to cutie. Peme mai, Luigi chato to see you da. Tell us I comes, you can make a Luigi comes, so which I should to see you da. Oh, under the side come the time I is true da. Maybe to Shelley give my Shibu mai, give up Peme mai, give up my money mai. Didn't car, doggy mai day, share so ya mina. Taki maise, Rame target in Yamaresar. Shensu ya Mayeno sister Tabo Mevasigora. Chibabo Dengane, Shenda Tabo Yara, Balik Sigura, Java Kitchen, Tabo. Jiden Chibabo, Jiden Tabo Kanga Song get the Sera. Shensu ya my ote Tabo de Maresura, and the Tabo de Seven Mareset and Dare. Tabo Shenda, your mother, still want to get round with your mother. Round Taji Kanga Chingang Cheba Buchia Yomaresia to the Kuyara. Shansuya Mainos. Shanda Sushi won't use the Soshange or Tended Maresigura. My notation do. Chui come Tamai Kanga Chajura. So which I say. Chui come the may come. Chui come Yata my Kiva my money my Shansuya Mainos area. May come down, Lungi come down, Namge come. Chuchi. Order. Namge come down, number she come jata mai. The Pumbutina Liang so which I sheta. Sheba down, Sem that to Kang, ready renata maresi. Simjam my insem. Sem that dembe on the Kawachin Chitun, Droting at the Lichida Simjaresiba. You saw my. Kewa bo maye, shele keba maye, shibu maye, keba maye pimita kanga chebare, keba maye, mani maye, nga maye, taki maye, shen suya maye no se. O tiba to chi wana.
So, then it says regarding that, the earth element is not the self, and not a being, not a life force, not a creature, not Manu's progeny, not Manu's descendant, not a woman, not a man, not a neuter, not I, not mine, and not of any other. So here, all of the kind of components that make up the self or the person, when one looks within that, you can't identify something that is the self, that is like a being or a life force. So here, it will similarly go through all of the elements, but we begin with the earth element, identifying that it is not the self, it is not a being, it is not a life force. And so some of these in other translations might have slightly different translations to this. It is not kind of progeny of Manu, considered to be sort of the original person who gave rise to other beings. And so not a creature, not Manu's progeny, not Manu's descendant. And we can't identify that if the earth element were a self as being a woman, a man, a neuter, not I, not mine, and not of any other. It's not something that belongs to something else. So then similarly, the water element, fire element, air element, space element, and consciousness element are not the self, not a being, not a life force, not a creature, not Manu's progeny, not Manu's descendant, not a woman, not a man, not a neuter, not I, not mine, and not of any other. So each of the elements or components that make up the person, when we look through each of the parts, we can say that they are selfless in that none of them is the self. None of them is this life force or like the progeny of Manu as asserted by other Hindus, can't be identified as being this is a man or a woman, a neuter. It can't be pointed to as being the self nor of any other.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's in the car soda. Mida baga juda kyala tani kena mambo shekdo. Tindi ko juda kyangi wage rawa meba ko ya kyugu yara. Yelenda lenji ke chashe mambo shekdo. Shekudu tani ko rawan du tubache yana yomara. Mida baga wange kansa rejine tichi mida le tungense. Tunga wa tanda yaga rejine ko juriye na kare na et Korsoro soboyina somboyina nasa mene kanchi jurchojo rechirede toa. Karina jurcho tanda yaga yena tuga yena jurni tawa yena ko jurne kanga. Tunga wa kansa reshana. Leda nyomu wange. Rawa me ba ke ni pungula te de. Tako yonya drama mambo tunga yonya ba tacho sara. Tunga wa ase. Inde da me ba tezu tokudoa. Midaba ko de woji chana ni shenda kanga yabu yongo are. Juda kenge chena kilote soso. Juda kenge chena kilote. Ni teda nyamdo soso dakshi tani sana pungbu dan tozo latene tudan tulu sombo cheta na telu yabu sana. Rawe tajo yoya medwa. Kena sobo dan semda choa da re ne pa da yimbachi medwa. De rawa siya loga tezule los chini yo mara nangba chena. Ogbenale shuden de chishenda je yo mara. Pumbule ten shambache. Pumbule be kaka chiyona. Pumbu chawa chaba de daga chawa chaba do mara. Eko le sambu saya menge ba saya me lonje lo lonjenge menge dare chanura. De pumbunga de chawa chaba de daga chawa chaba. Pumbunga la tene takwa samle ane taasi pa shagru mata. Rawa yo marese. Timida ba ta tezu shetu. Ti chashe riri ne marese. Me ko mevra sa mare. Ti chashe tezu le tene pa takwa chiwa res. Til shagru mato. Rawa che yo marda se. Kyujingi kidu ne ko kyujingi shama me ba tsuke onde rawa ta che kawa yo yo da. Rawa ta se ne rang yo ba resi ora. Ngarang ne yo rang ne yo ba. Shanda le tu sin den ming chi ta ni sha shan ge de do. Ngo kang ge de do ta chi bu mara. Kang ba yin na da ka re na da sang ma ta ge de to. O te ha ko ya tan dal de. De re ne ta ma re sung ta. Te inde ta de ka re ne ten ne ta ba sam ta sha ora. Rawan du dro bang ba kang ga ta chi bu mara. Nyu gu da chi ngo bu chi shin na cha le so ba kang ga. Rawan du yo ba chi yo mara. Te ne gyu dan ke le ten ne ko rawan ba ya choye de yo ma ko korang ko ne chu yo cho ga da. O te ji la ne de re.
So here, dependent arising then implies dependence upon causes and conditions, meaning that phenomena can't arise independently, like autonomously. When we think about something like the self or the I, it's not as though this is something that exists in and of itself, like not dependent upon causes and conditions. And when we really examine that, we can see that the self is impermanent. Although, like in this moment, we might be healthy, we are at the verge of change. We are always almost or really within that a state of impermanence, such that nothing remains just as it is. But rather, when we think about the person, the self, that they're taking up these aggregates due to the force of karma and of the afflictions, mean that there is no autonomy. One is under the control of that karma and afflictions, such that you don't have the sort of autonomous nature of being set up by yourself, having that kind of independence or existence apart, like in and of itself. So when we really look at it, when we look through the various components that constitute the person, this aggregation of body and mind components, when we go through all of them, each of them, we can't point to something that exists as the self within that basis of designation. We can look at all of the various parts, but we can't point to something and say, well, that is the self. But there can't be something like sometimes we have this sense that like deep in our stomach or in the pit of our stomach, there's like this I, this feeling of I that's somehow separate and apart from the aggregates. If that were the case, that there was some sort of self that were apart from that, then the self would not be carrying out the actions of the aggregates, nor would it be subject to the kind of ripening of karmas that have been done by that those aggregates and so forth. So it can't be that there is some self which is separate and apart from the aggregates, that is unconnected. Therefore, there would be all of these problems of like not experiencing karma and so forth. But when we look in this way and look through each of the kind of parts within the basis of designation, we look aside from that and there's no self that we can find. Does it mean then that there is no self whatsoever? Well, there isn't a self that exists in that kind of autonomous, independent way, but there is a self that is merely dependently designated on the aggregates. So we have this sense of an I, of a self that exists from its own side. But when we look through each of the parts of the self, when we look outside of that, we can't find anything that we can point to and say this is the self, but rather the self is something which is dependently designated on its basis of designation, and it is in that capacity that it can carry out functions and so forth. We can experience the results of our karma.
Oya deso. Ta marik ba de ngon jing do. Tela marik ba kan she na se. Come to bu te da. Yila ka chi bu do she ba ta. Mara zo le de come to ta de she so sa chu me lo la so ba. Mang bu chi so tang ge che de do. O tele ane le she re bu to do ro chi len do she ba te. Ko no ro ba yin. Do chi ma ro ko come to de de te ril bu chi ka se re. O chi bu ro do she ba. Le se chi bu chi gyang gyang ji do she ba re chi. Sam le ta gu ra. Ane re bu do she 두 망보 초 댕게지로와 두 망보 초 댕게질이야 타데서 소소베 시비카가 여름마도 리부찌랑제요 마라 걔네 고 찌부른 도시바다서 라 네 리부른 도시바다 딱반 도시바다 계지 junge지레도라 이나야 단다데 쳔마 댕게레셔서 nga마데 마시바시 칠 니바숨벌 대섬 나게만에 단다유 단다 마음반 대그리 삼서 삼루코도 원래는 사바사바데 마도 디코미마 요베데 계지 지루라 딱반 도시바다스 계지 소소 타대냐 만주르체 좀 대기 위해서라지 땜반 도시바다스 디 땜보르지 직된 제바보서 딱바랑 좀더 텐데게 땜바지 마제바지 제바를 삼 땜빈 도시 제바 텐데레 자위서라 너 마제바 현다 저와 마제지 제바지 신바인 삼네 땜보르지 도시 버셔서 다치다 계지 마주지 땜보레 자도 조이지라 특수든 도시바 계지는 지금 그냥 마음바나 단다데 제만 댕겐듯이 도시버들 틀수스다. 근데 대화는 도시버다. 그래도 단다 대부분 기분이 삼사를 삼부도 같이 노르체 뒤삼나 야구도 하고 거래서 거체 야구에 삼도 그래서서 당원에 전에 그 동해 주에 동해 처반 두지 동해기 류다 강걸 땡시 대화라 그 가리네 용처저제 사준벨롱 좋아제 류나라니 심부담메다셴부 담메다세 가르가르 샤도이데 케하고 마라 단다 야가르즈네 코 줄네 동해레데레 왜네 레다 녀무베 샹와쟁기 처번 두지 동해데 여데 가리네 요세버시라 제 동해 숨단 된베 요데 치리단 데데 대화는 두시바데 코 노래를 메시바데 상가라 아니 다도 두시바 아치보라 라웨 단위도 요래 심제 소다 교화보다 소화보다 기부다 강사도 두시보다 셰레케보다 시분 두시보다 셰자와다 다기 셰자와 두시바데 대답을해서 미시바나바 나서바데네 마르바시죠 다데 장가르 시자르마도 치다 미시베 몸바 망부 연구라 어디보다 치구나
So then, regarding that, what is ignorance? So the beliefs that these same 6 elements are a unit, a uniform mass, permanent, enduring, unchanging, pleasurable, a self, a being, a life force, a creature, thriving, a human, an individual, Manu's progeny, Manu's descendant, I, mine, and various types of nescience, such as that, are called ignorance. So here, regarding ignorance, we have all of these different components that constitute the basis of designation of a self, but we have this sense of there being somehow like permanent and enduring. So here, the language that is used around this, where it says that what is ignorance, the beliefs that these same 6 elements are like a unit, a single kind of uniform thing, is this idea that they are singular, kind of like a whole, and then they are viewed as being permanent. So in the sense of like, we have this feeling like, oh, I'm here now and I remain, even though it's the case that we are changing moment to moment. There isn't one sort of static, stable self that is enduring, but rather we're changing moment to moment. And then so that's kind of what we get to with that kind of sense of these same 6 elements as being like a single kind of unit, one singular thing, as well as something that is permanent, enduring, in the sense that we feel that like the self, the I that is here now, will be there later. That's unchanging as well. So this kind of understanding of a self, or these beliefs are all ignorance, right? So that we hold then this to be pleasurable. So we hold in the sense that something might be identified as being pleasurable. But again, this is ignorance in the sense that we are constantly subject to the three types of suffering, if not the suffering of suffering or the suffering of change. We are subject continually to the pervasive suffering of conditioned existence. And whoever is subject to that is like under the control of their karma and afflictions, in the sense that they will experience suffering, or they're really in this kind of suffering that they have then identified as being somehow kind of pleasurable, or something that is yeah, pleasurable. And so then when it comes to as well thinking that this ignorance imputes that these same six elements are a self, a being, a life force, a creature, thriving, a human, an individual, Manu's progeny or Manu's descendant, I, mine. So these types of nescience, or kind of wrong knowing, in which one is holding that there is such a self within that which is actually selfless, that there is a kind of life force, a creature, an individual, this kind of I or mine. These types of nescience, such as that, are called ignorance.
Yeah. Tati marikba andirido. Marikba yube yu namla. Dechada shedada timuju o tende. Marikba tala mikba la soba tende marikba mambo yubate. Ah, sengeri ju tabu raba chi rawa raba. O kajinji yube samlutan yatege. Ande tala tanzin shukshambu yungara. Tanzin shukshambu yudane taage. Longche da longche bapo da tende yibale samne sukta tiru rekchala soba. Tezule mikbe chakba chimbo yungura. Nge samsa ngala tiko timogo tiko samlo mambo yungura shenja. Chakba da. Ni shedan da. Tezu da tima tu susu kueba te da mitumba. Gen chenge. Roa. Gen chenge. Samlo mitumba. Yule. Danyole susu tele parche chenge sota. Kanga kondu yungura. Chakbe yuchi yu chenje tele kondu yungura. Tele gen chenge sam. Tene temo juk de ese. Shedan da temo juk de ese. Tela yu namlan docha da shedan da temo kanyen ba tene. Maribe kenjin duchi che chawas. O te chema chakbe wange sakbe le da. Le kewa me kewa longba ten. Kondo wange sakbe me kewe le. Temo wange sakbe le kewa me kewa sungwa yon chawra. O tezu maribe kenji en duchi nam she chawas. Tande le tere suda. Docha da shedan da temo. O tela yu la. Docha da shedan da temo kanyen ba tene. Maribe kenji duchi she chawas. Maribe kenji niban duchi ji le de la. Docha da shedan da temo sti kyu ba ming tane. Shebe sunta shekdo ande na. Tunda tere da. Tome mariba cha niban duchi le sa gre se. Chatan docha shedan temo wage. Obo sosoro. Nambar sheba wase. Niban duchi le che ni sumba namshe. Paksha shasa tele sumba namshe sigra. Le kembe ke sama paksha shasa tele sumba namshe esche. Niban duchi le sumba namshe. O de chinge kura ti mashi kasi shen samcho. Tende yana chunye shadu sa tanda nga zude tome mariba niban duchi sumba namshe sude kyu tende li she paksha yange li she gra. Tayan zoyo dan tende nane shedu yang shedan chilo. Sumba namshe de nizam charma takba namshe li she gra. Kyo ngama tele tome mariba niban duchi kyu tende she. Sumba namshe sude nizam char sange kyo lang sange li she gra. Kasi nga zo sumba namshe de paksha yoke kyu tende she ba. Sa ngonda chidar nini da shera. Kyo ngama tele Kyawan deli chashana tome marwa da niban duchi nyi re chara. Ta dine chuba seba chujiba kyawa chunjiba kashi su chima dili kyawa da kashi nyi sikidwa. O tende chidu, ene kyuyi tende tili ya, kari rendo da, 교회 텐트들라 망아 찬도라 드베 텐트들 용어 찬도도 근데 셰준이 와라 순반 남셰들라 겨울랑만 타베 남셰를 지수 시시나 니 교회 텐트 드베 텐트 투도라 뭐래 야치 니번 도시길래 순반 남셰데 레 샤사가 남셰들에서는 교회 텐트 찬도라 텐트 셰준이 용도 텐트래 근데 가르다 두지남 셰자다 반제 가가 요다 뭐버서서 넘버 셰바나 넘버 셰바샤 넘버 셰바다 해지 좋아네 예발레 풍부시부 디다네세 소안도 시삼바 풍부에 나네 샨다시디스 오라 소보마이가 맹다 소소 맹기 풍부다 수지 풍부세 맹다 수시바 메수 메수라 템베 원부 남니 계시세 시바 메수라 때는 메게 원부 나웨 원부 네 원부 또 두고라 메게 계시 나웨 계시 네 계시 계시세 두고라 계시스네 두고라 계시스 텔 때는 뭐 나와 저 리와도 샤소나 텔 때는 유수다 저로데 샤로서 봐 샤네 근데 소아 다와다 동에다 땅님 셔셔네 대고고도 대고고메도 산타 삼로 망보야 견드여와 대손자 계시스도 남시 계시 쳐봐 견드여 삼라데 미 동에게 맨날 술을 맨날 남시 쳐드게 오마라 암저 다토야 맨날 다들 때는 남시 야 쳐드 견드게 오마라 계시 세야 되더라 대단해 민다 술라 원보 남지 두고 오셔 최숨 잘했다 중이 조숨
일반이지.
야 들어와 중이지 최숨반에 그래 최숨 되반에 렉바와서 돼 숨반남 시바면서 나와께지 두고 렉바시고라 유제 왕부제 남셰숨 되소나 다 좋아대와 동에 땅이 영용거라 렉바세데 유왕 남셰숨 분념도 초바들이야 렉바시게 제베 레게치 요마라 렉방원에 지지테게 요마라 콘두숨데 참바들이야 렉바시 민다바 인샤라 두고 렉바시 텔레테네네 좋아용거라 미다 수다 이 테마타 텔레 이 땡게 숨드거라 미긴 다긴 테마타긴 세거라 유수타 테로 렉자코거라 네 명한 나와죠 야 미기 야 수기 대기 되게로게 되게 미기 나와게네 이게 되치자 네 미기 넘버셔 텔레테네 남시키거라 숨드벌 때네 네 가서 텔레테네네 좋아 유디 소수 루심레 펜베 수진 요소는 좋아되어서라 루심레 네베 수진 요소는 좋아 동에서라 펜에게 멘베 수진 요소는 좋아 동요서 좋아야지 무슨 거라 뭐 좋아 개발서와 좋아 정소는 네 좋아되와 정소는 대구도 선민대회 세바 용거라 좋아 동네 정소는 따뜻해 되나 좀 되어라 세바 용거라 자고 세바 용거라 좋아할 때는 땅님 얘는 도때 묵게서 땅지를 깨마도 차단 듣는 게 기기서 말도 좀 저거 좀 좋아 네 개발세 봐세 될 때는 좋아되어 개발세 구발렘 봐 소화돼 대화 토부선 대화다 맞는 단다 내나 삼면 받을 수도 숙처를 넣으라고 동에다 대화들이 아파니 양자 멤버 숙처를 넣어야 되나 렘바시아라 비게 레레 소탑에 개발세바 구발렘바니데 소탑기요 봐 누가 쳐당겨 봐 오늘 주바시베 레스 레 누가 투제 사담에 가와게나 대야 누가 숙침 붙여라 오늘 주지바 개와 치마도라 종이바까지 지르거든 저때도 강가 방송도 개바 어깨네 풍부민반에 개바시야 개네 풍부식반에 치와 풍부식도다 남식이 된식이요 말에 남식다 소분이 저음에 버쳐오래 시신 그래대 응원발 차보다 셰베 나게 용수 동안에 양해해서 그라 네 치와다 치외 내가서 로저 다들 레송 섬 티디 디마스 티디 레스 티디 레송 다 차고 마보 요초라 전에 당한테서 상만 트렌드고 삼사sem바 용서 동안에 양해 심대 치고라 양해래 중안에 명한 돈 받아 안에 심대 저 다네 시간 뭐 가시는 거 진짜 뭐 연구다 명한 돈 받아 넘버 10에 초다 덴베 메데와 뇨안에 동해 일을 제바다 덴베 이지 동해니 이 메데와 셈데만 보셔야다 샤야 데다불라 소바 니베 뇨모바 남 가인 바데네 축바시데네 셈투네 삼루마 부코르라 디 축바시데 셈투 공동하게 타도한테세 유주다 담메다 삼루마 부코르라 요모리 노 디바도치 나 디바도한테
No. So here then it says, thus, because ignorance is present, desire, anger, and bewilderment proceed in relation to objects. So when we have the ignorance that holds that there's some sort of solid, stable, singular kind of a self, then we have this sort of self-grasping that arises from that. And due to that, there is then attachment to one's own side, a kind of craving for desired objects, and a hatred or an aversion toward those things that are seen as obstacles to getting what we want or that are disharmonious with our ways of thinking and so forth. So when we have attachment, when we have this, well, first ignorance that grasps at a self, we will then have attachment to one's own side, and in turn, the kind of animosity toward the other. And when one has those kinds of afflictions that proceed in relation to objects, so regarding that, desire, anger, and bewilderment with regard to objects are called the conditioning factors dependent on ignorance. So due to that ignorance, we then create various kinds of karma, do non-virtuous activities driven by our afflictions, or we might engage in those activities which are virtuous out of attachment and so forth. And that creates what are called conditioning factors. And those conditioning factors then place imprints on the consciousness. So the third link, as it is described here, it says, knowing entities individually is consciousness. So the kind of imprints that are put down on that consciousness, we have discussed this previously, that there are different ways of apportioning the kind of 12 links into causes and effects. If we look at consciousness as the consciousness at the time at which those imprints are placed, we would consider that to be a cause, and therefore there would be 6 causes and 6 results. If instead, like is in the Abhidharma Kosha by Vasubandhu, for example, we consider consciousness to be the consciousness at the moment of conception or at the moment of rebirth, then that would be the kind of consciousness that is a result. I'm not referring to that at the time in which it was sort of affected by those various imprints. And so again, that's something that we have discussed before regarding the kind of which are causes and which are results. So here, knowing entities individually is consciousness, and this is referring to consciousness that is the basis then for placing those kinds of imprints. And the 4 appropriating aggregates arising together with consciousness are name and form. So name referring to the other non-form aggregates, and then form. And in turn, those act as the basis for the 6 sense organs, or sorry, the 5 sense organs. The sense organs that depend on name and form are the 6 sense bases. So these are called 6 sense bases in the sense that they act as a basis for distinguishing various objects. We have our eye, our ear, our nose, our tongue, our body, our mind, and it is in dependence upon those that we then engage with objects. So the 3 factors assembling is contact. So here, when it comes to what we were talking about with contact and being able to perceive objects, when we have these all come together, that leads to what we call contact. So that involves there being an object condition object condition, the empowering condition of the particular sense power, and then the immediately preceding condition of a previous moment of consciousness. And when we have those three then assembled together, this creates contact. And the contact experience leads to feeling. If it is something that is pleasurable to us, we have a sort of happy feeling. If it is something that is displeasurable, we experience suffering. And if it is neither suffering nor happiness, there's a kind of neutral feeling. But based then upon that feeling, we then have the arising of craving and grasping. So the attraction to feeling is craving. When we have something that we don't want to be separated from, or when we have something that we want to be separated from, there's a craving for that kind of separation. So increased craving is grasping, and this is what in turn creates the conditions for that karma, which is referred to as existence, or here it is referred to as becoming, to become efficacious. So it is through the nurturing of that karma, through craving and grasping, that it becomes becoming, giving rise then to a new birth. So the aggregation arising from that cause is birth. And then following birth, the aggregation maturing is aging. Following aging, the aggregation perishing is death. The internal anguish of one dying, bewildered, and with strong grasping is sorrow. Now here, for those who are non-practitioners, the time of death can be something that is quite distressing. We see that there are those that are crying and suffering at the time of death, and really this is due to that kind of craving and grasping and not having a right view. And then the internal anguish of one dying, bewildered, and with strong grasping is referred to as sorrow. The lament that arises from sorrow is lamentation. So when we verbalize, express that. The unpleasant experience associated with a group of 5 consciousnesses is misery. Mental suffering, so we can experience those kinds of physical displeasures, here referred to as misery. And mental suffering associated with mentation is unhappiness. So we can also create, through our ways of thinking, mental unhappiness. And whatever other ancillary defilements such as that are called conflict. And here really conflict we might think of more as disturbance, the kind of when our mind is disturbed or not at ease.
Oh yeah, that is.
So that will do for today, as we have run out of time.
Oh yeah.
Rinpoche Kadunche, and thank you so much,
yeah,
Katrina. And we'll look forward to
welcome.
seeing everyone back here at the same time next week. So let's conclude with our usual prayers.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Recording stopped.